my region manager said to me that your pay raise is effective as soon as you are. Your pay raise, Tucker, your pay raise, Enrique, is effective as soon as you are, and it's more effective the more effective you are. Is everyone with me on that? And so if you want to write that down, and if you want to, everyone should know that your pay raises are at $3 grand, $6 grand, 10K, 20, 30, 50, 150. It's in your original paperwork as a sales rep, and it's in the newsletter every week. So, every one of these pay raises, Riker, is yours for the taking, the more effective you become in the job. And that's why our next message, I retitled the title that Quentin, are you going to share any slides, or are you just going to go? Okay, that's fine. So Quentin's got some great content for us right now. And we always want to have a really great message when we're starting the year about the value of Cutco, about helping customers get what they want to get. And so the title that Quentin and I talked about when I was on a ski lift was helping the customer get what they want. So everyone write that down. Helping the customer get what they want. When I was making this slide, I forgot the title of the message, and then we texted this morning, and I'm like, I got to change that, and I didn't change it. So I knew it was something along the lines of selling a lot of Cutco. All in favor of selling a lot of Cutco? Everyone want to learn how to do that? So what I love about Quentin is he was asked this summer to give a message at our region sales conference number 2, right? And SC2. And he gave what I heard, our division had a separate SC2. We were one of the only divisions that had a separate SC2. The rest of the region was able to drive into Chicago and have this meeting. And Quentin actually, it was widely raved about his message on closing the sale. And he's not giving the exact message, but he's going to give a lot of key points about how he, as a college student, sold basically $140,000, making 50% commission. And then he also trained sales representatives to sell about $100,000 worth of Cutco this summer as a branch manager. So he came home from your church mission to the Philippines a year and, is it almost 3? Oh, really? Okay. I keep forgetting you started the job 2+ years ago, but it was, that's when you had just recently come home, obviously. Yeah, 3 years. Okay. So, and you've been selling Cutco now for 2.5 years and ran a branch for 3-4 months of that. So basically 2 years, you've sold $315,000 worth of Cutco. Just Quentin's such a great guy. We went skiing a couple weeks ago on an amazing day. We were going waist deep in powder. It was absolutely amazing. It was December 18th, if I'm not mistaken. So it was an awesome day. And so I'm going to bring Quentin up to the front of the room. And you want to definitely take notes. Quentin Israelsen, he's originally from the Dirty 630, as I like to call it. He's from Chicago. He's from a town not far from where I grew up, just a couple of miles away. So everybody, let's give him a round of applause. Quentin Israelsen. There you go. Excellent. Go for it, sir.
All righty. Make sure virtual and in person.
Yes.
Okay, so I am super excited to be giving this talk today and talking about closing, about objection handling. Who here remembers their training? Great, awesome. Who here remembers talking about closing and dropping down in training? Okay, we're actually going to revisit some of those principles today, and then we're going to build on top of them. Okay, a lot of the things that I do are things that I first learned during training. Okay, but I love talking about closing and objection handling because it's really what makes this job fun. Okay, it's what makes this job exciting. Now, this job would not be very fun if every single demo you did, you sold an ultimate. Okay, I'm sure some of you would be very happy about that, but I promise you after a little bit, it wouldn't be that enjoyable, okay? Because it would be boring. Every single demo would be the same thing over and over and over, okay? What's exciting about this job is growing and being able to grow from seeing how you can continue to close better and handle objections better, okay? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. My goal is that by the end of this talk, you're going to have a little bit of kind of a mindset switch towards how to effectively close and what it means to handle objections on your demos. Okay, so make sure you're taking lots of notes. because we're going to talk a little bit about things conceptually, and then I'm also going to give you like the tactical stuff. Okay, this business is 80% psychology and 20% tactical. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the mindset towards closing and towards handling objections. And then I'm going to give you what are the actual things you want to say. Okay, so we're going to talk about the mindset first. So closing, like, what is it? What is closing and what is closing not? Okay, first, let me just tell you, closing is not forcing someone to buy Cutco. Okay, closing is not forcing someone to buy Cutco. Closing is not tricking someone into buying Cutco. We don't use, just weird tricks to get people to say yes. Closing is not flattery. It's not flattering someone into buying the product, okay, or flattering them into liking you. What closing is, and write this down, it's a transfer of enthusiasm. Okay, sales is a transfer of enthusiasm. People don't buy Cutco necessarily off of your demos. They buy your belief in the product. Okay, people buy your belief in the product. So what does that mean? If you don't believe that the Ultimate set is the best set that we make, or if you believe that the Homemaker set is way too expensive, are you going to sell very many Homemakers? Great. Okay, you're not going to sell very many if you don't actually believe in the quality or the value of the product that you're selling. So closing starts off with your belief. Okay, I can teach you the words to say, but if you don't actually believe in what you're saying, it's not going to make any difference, I promise. Okay, there could be two different sales reps and both of them could say the exact same thing, but the one who believes more in what they're saying is going to sell more at the end of the day. Okay. What is closing? Closing is helping the customer get what they already want. Okay, this is something that I learned, and I remember my division manager, when I first went through training, Greg Strine, telling us this on day 3 of training. Okay, closing is helping the customer get what they want, and I've seen time and time again during the past 2.5 years in this business that is 100% true. Okay, so if you believe that closing is helping the customer get something that they already want, how does that change how you approach your demo? How does that change the tone that you use as you're going through your manual? Yeah.
They're actually going to use it and want it rather than having something they don't use or don't want.
Yeah. Like you're not feeling bad about like selling them something that they're not going to use, right? It's something that they want and you're helping them do that, right? Kayla, was that a hand up? No? Okay, cool. Yeah, so when you believe that you're helping the customer get something that they already want, you're going to come off as more confident, okay? And you're actually going to be on the side of your customer. The best way to think about doing a demo is being your customer's personal shopping assistant, okay? Be your customer's personal shopping assistant. Because think about how most people buy knives. They go to the store, okay, they look around, all they see a bunch of knives. Typically the knife section of the kitchen store is pretty awesome. There's like a bunch of lights, everything's in glass. It's a pretty cool part of the kitchen store, but there's no one there to instruct them or tell them about what the knives are about. There's no one there to tell them about the value of what they're buying, okay? And so automatically people end up buying cheap stuff, right? So Cutco is different because we actually give them an experience where you get to be there and assist them through the process and help solve their concerns and answer their questions. Okay, so you're their personal shopping assistant. Last thing I'll say about what closing is this little equation. And this doesn't just apply to closing, but all sales in general. And it's this idea that rapport plus certainty equals influence. Okay, rapport plus certainty equals influence. If you and your customer have built solid rapport, okay, you trust them and they trust you. At the end of the day, the person who is going to close the other person is the one who is more certain. Okay. If you have built solid rapport, the person who's going to close the other person is the one who is more certain. So you have to be certain in your conviction about Cutco as a product. You have to be certain in your conviction about the price and the value of what you're selling. You have to be certain that what you're giving them is going to be an experience that they're going to use and love every single day for the rest of their lives, and their grandchildren are going to inherit that product. Okay, so that's kind of like the mindset towards closing. Okay, so what are some of the tools that we use to close? Okay, one of them is closing questions. I'm going to talk a lot about this. There are different types of closing questions, but here's what a closing question is, if you want to write this down. Closing question is a question that gives the customer an opportunity to verbalize a commitment to you or the product. A closing question is a question that gives the customer an opportunity to verbalize a commitment to you or the product. Okay, let me give you an example. And this can actually be really, really simple. When you're playing the videos, if you're doing like virtual demos, are most people here doing virtual demos or is it in person? Okay, cool. So when you're doing virtual demos, when you're like playing the video on the trimmer and they're cutting through that tomato, okay, like it shows the trimmer is white. Okay, and you can let them know at that point. By the way, Mrs. Jones, we actually make the knives in like white or dark handles. Like if you had it, which do you think you'd like better? Okay, and they say like, oh, yeah, probably the dark. That's actually a closing question that you just asked. Okay, it sounds simple. You're just asking them which color they like better. But by Mrs. Jones responding and saying, oh, I actually like the classic color, I like the dark color better, she's actually making a commitment in her mind, because she's visualizing those dark colored handles in her own kitchen. Okay, so there are different types of closing questions, and one of the best types of closing questions are yes or yes questions. Okay, yes or yes questions. In fact, you also learned this in training when you learned your phone script. Okay, when you call your recommendations and you say, hey, would Tuesday at 6 or 7:30 work better for you? Okay, you're asking a yes or yes question. It's not open-ended. Okay, so that's actually a closing question that you're asking. Would this time or this time work better for you? We do the same thing in our demos. So a good yes or yes question you could ask is, hey, Mrs. Jones, which color handle do you like better, the white or the dark? Okay, which color handle do you like better, the white or the dark? Another yes or yes questions you can ask is, hey, Mrs. Jones, if you were going to do it, would you do it in full or would you just split it up? And I always like to let them know, like, by the way, Mrs. Jones, most of our customers end up splitting it up. Like 99% of people who buy Cutco split it up because it's way easier. So if you were going to do it, would you do it in full or would you split it up? Okay, so you can be assumptive and suggestive. Okay. But then ask that yes or yes question. You give them an option. Okay, so that's one type of closing question. Another type of closing question would be like an assumptive closing question. Okay, so here's one of my favorites that I like to ask, if you want to write this down. Wouldn't you agree, Mrs. Jones, that it just makes sense to invest in quality? Wouldn't you agree, Mrs. Jones, that it just makes sense to invest in quality? And that's not necessarily something that happens at the end of your demo. Closing actually happens the entirety of the demo. Okay, after the guarantee. Okay, after the guarantee, I can ask Mrs. Jones, like, couldn't you see how that would make life a lot easier in the kitchen? Okay, after going through the names and uses of the homemaker, like I can ask an assumptive question, like, could you see how over a lifetime of cooking you would get use out of all those pieces? Knowing you'd have this set for the next 30, 40, 50 years. Okay, so that's another type of closing question. It doesn't just happen on page 9. Okay, and then the last type of closing question would be like an ask for the order question. Okay, ask for the order question. This is the type of closing question that you cannot replace. Okay, it has to happen for you to close. Okay, so this is like when you get to that part in your manual where you say, hey, Mrs. Jones, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you, but you want to go ahead and do that today? Okay, and this can take a number of ways as long as you ask for that order. Okay, like you could simply say like, hey, Mrs. Jones, you want to do it? Right? Now, it's the first time you ask, you should say, hey, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you. But you want to go ahead and do that today? Okay, can I get that written up for you? I know you like the white handles and the dark color block. Okay, so closing questions are a tool that we use to close. Okay, they give your customer an opportunity to verbalize their commitment to you and to Cutco. Okay, another tool that we have in closing is stories. Okay, use stories in your demos. So there are kind of 3 different ways that I like to do my stories. And the first one is my mom. Okay, every single demo, my mom makes like 6 appearances. So I'm like, oh my gosh, Mrs. Jones, like this trimmer, that's like my mom's favorite piece. Okay, she loves it so much. She uses it for almost everything, right? Oh my God, like Mrs. Jones, my mom, believe it or not, like she's obsessed with this cleaver. I know not everyone, you're not going to use the cleaver every single day, but my mom loves it because when she's getting through bones in her chicken, it gets through them like butter. Okay, so tell stories. Your customers can imagine themselves, see the pieces in action in their mind a lot better. Okay, another story you can tell is the most people story. Okay, the most people story. Mrs. Jones, most people split up their Cutco over 5 months because they find that it's way easier on their cash flow. And you probably didn't wake up this morning thinking today's knife day. Most people, Mrs. Jones, split up their Cutco payments over 5 months because it's way easier. And you probably didn't wake up today thinking today's knife day. Okay, most people, Mrs. Jones, love the butcher knife because it makes cutting their watermelon so much easier. Most people we find have been replacing their knives over and over and over throughout their lives. And so they love that with Cutco, they buy it once and they never have to buy it again. And then the last story you can tell is the my customer story. Okay, my customer, Mrs. Jones, and this is something that you can share if like you've had a personal experience. Okay, if you are just starting out, or maybe you don't have a customer, no worries, you don't have to share that. But if you do have a customer who's gotten their Cutco, reach out to them and ask them what their experience has been. Okay, like my customer, Mrs. Jones, actually, like this slicer is so sharp. She was so used to using a dull bread knife. She was cutting open a hot dog bun and she actually almost cut through her hand, like, right? So you can tell stories. That's a true story, by the way. And that's an exaggeration, but you can share stories from your customers about their experiences. Okay. So we're helping the customer get what they want. Okay. So that's kind of a little bit about closing. I want to talk a little bit about objections. Okay, closing and objections are very closely related together. But I'm going to have you write down 4 truths about objections. Okay, because there's a lot of misconceptions about what it means to handle an objection. Okay, or what an objection is. Okay, so here are the 4 truths about objections. Number 1. An objection is just a request for more information. Okay, an objection is just a request for more information. Okay, think about how this like makes approaching objections different for you. Okay, if previously you're like nervous to get an objection on your demo, if you ask for the order and you're scared for what the answer is going to be, right? You're not thinking about objections correctly. Okay, objections are just a request for more information. Okay, so if you get an objection after asking for the order at the homemaker or at the signature set or at the ultimate set, right? Your customer just needs a little bit more information before you get that yes. And your job as a personal shopping assistant is to make it as easy as possible to say yes. Okay, so number 2, every objection can be handled. Every objection can be handled. Okay, some of you may not believe me on that at first. I promise you it's true. Okay, and that doesn't mean that I'm perfect at handling all objections. Okay, I don't think there is a sales rep that is perfect at handling all objections, right? Everyone gets no sales. Okay, those reps that you saw, Mike Dowd, who sold over $1 million last year, he had plenty of no sales, I promise you. Okay, statistically speaking, people who are more successful are also having more adversity. So just remember, like every objection can be handled, but how does that change the way that you approach your objections? Okay, how does that change your mindset towards them? It should make it more exciting, knowing that you can grow in how you handle your objections. Okay, and that there is an answer for how you can handle every objection. There's actually a way, there's a cycle, a process for you to follow, that if you learn it, you can learn how to handle every objection that comes your way. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Number 3, the third truth about objections. The best way to handle an objection, is to handle it before it comes up. Okay, the best way to handle an objection is to handle it before it comes up. I'll give you an example. If the objection is price, right? Oh, Cutco's way too expensive, right? 5-pay, that's how we handle it after it comes up, right? We give them the 5-pay, right? But how do we handle that before it comes up? It's by building more value. Okay, it's by telling stories about how other people in their same situation were also able to afford Cutco. Okay, it's building a higher price expectation so they're not surprised when they hear that price. Okay, so the best way to handle objections is to handle them before they come up, right? And the fourth truth about objections. Most objections are smokescreens. Okay, most objections are smokescreens. Okay, what does that mean? If an objection is a smokescreen, it means that it's hiding the true objection. Okay, it's hiding the true objection, or there's something more specific about your objection that you need to get information about. Okay, so for example, someone might tell you like, oh, like it's a lot of money, right? And that may be true, but what they haven't told you is that last week their furnace broke down and they had to spend, a couple grand to fix it, right? That would be good information for you to know. So you can help get on the customer side, be their personal shopping assistant. Right? So every objection is a smokescreen. Or you might be seeing a mom without her husband or a husband without his spouse, right? If you're just seeing one spouse, and they might tell you, oh, it's too expensive, when in reality, the real objection is like, oh, I'm just not comfortable spending that without my spouse here. Right? And so their objection seems like it's a price objection, but really it's a spouse objection. Okay, so most objections are smokescreens, and your job is to figure that out and be on the customer side and be curious. Okay, write that down. Be curious. It's something that Greg Strine used to tell me all the time is be curious. Ask more questions on your demos. Okay. So a couple tips for handling your objections. One is your tone. Just be chill and keep it mellow. Okay, we know that an objection is just a request for more information, and we know that every objection can be handled, so don't freak out. Okay, and we also know that if they don't buy, it's no big deal, right? No sales are going to happen. So be chill. Okay, keep it mellow, be chill as you're closing and as you're handling objections. Okay, second tip for handling objections. It's okay to stand your ground when the value is high enough. And here's what I mean by this. It's okay to stand your ground when the value is high enough. What I mean is sometimes you might be able you might be with a couple who is like, they're right there, right? They are so close to just pulling the trigger on that galley set, right? Or they're so close to just pulling the trigger on the homemaker, right? And you know that, it might just take a little bit of lower price or a little bit of better deal. And you can just call your manager and ask for a better deal, okay? Or create a better deal for them, okay? What I'm saying is that you don't necessarily have to drop down immediately if you know that this is the right set and the right package for them, okay? So if you've built the value and the value's there and it is the right package for them, you can stand your ground and offer a better deal, okay? You don't have to drop down straight from the homemaker to a 5-piece if you know that the homemaker is the right package for them. Okay. All right. So really quick, I'm just going to talk about the objection cycle, and it's pretty simple. I'm not going to go super in depth on this just for sake of time. But there's 3 main steps to it. The first step when you get an objection is to agree and acknowledge the customer's objection. Okay. Agree with the customer and acknowledge their objection. Okay. Like, oh, we just bought a new house. There's been a lot of expenses. It's tax season. There's just a lot of expenses right now. Oh, I totally understand, Mrs. Jones, right? Like, Cutco's not cheap. We're not dealing with chump change. Like, it's a lot of money. I totally agree with you. Right? So agree with them and acknowledge their concern, right? Whatever the objection is. Step 2 is to clarify and isolate the objection. Clarify and isolate the objection. This means that you may have to dig a little bit deeper to find out what the real concern is if it's a smokescreen. Okay. So I always like to ask, like, so Mrs. Jones, if you don't mind me asking, just to make sure we're on the same page, it sounds like price is the only thing holding you back, right? So if I could find a way to get this set in your budget, you would do it, right? Okay. Because if it is a smokescreen, they're going to tell you like, oh, even if it wasn't in our budget, we wouldn't do it because that's just way too many pieces, right? They might tell you at first that it's price, but in their minds, they're thinking, oh, I also wouldn't use all the pieces in that set. So you want to know that information. So by clarifying, oh, this is the only thing holding you back, then you know what is the solution that you need to provide, which is the 3rd step of the objection cycle. Provide a solution. Okay, provide a solution. So what that means is that if the price is the problem, right? After you've just pitched the homemaker, maybe you've offered a homemaker with like a couple free gadgets, free vegetable peeler, free pizza cutter, whatever it is. And let's say price is the issue. They would use all the pieces in the homemaker if they had it, right? But price is the issue. Okay. Now you know that the solution that you need to provide is just offer a lower price. And you can call your manager to get that deal and say, hey, we're at the homemaker. I offered this, right? But I just want to see if we could get a little bit of a better price for them. It sounds like, they'd really love this set. Okay. And you can get a better deal that way, or you can create your own deal. Okay. And offer a better price. Now, if the objection is pieces and they don't actually see that they would use all those pieces. Okay. I always like to ask, hey, which pieces do you not see yourself using? Because it's a discounted package. And if I took those pieces out, it would actually make the price go up. So you're actually saving money as it is. But if there's multiple pieces that they really wouldn't see themselves using, then at that point, it makes sense to just drop down. Okay. If the set is too big, drop down to something smaller. Cutco's like Pokemon. And so once they buy it once, they're going to be obsessed and they're going to want more. So down the road, they can always get more. Right. But don't drop down until that is the answer to their objection. Okay. So if the homemaker is too big, it's too much money and it's too many pieces, then I can show them the galley set. Right. If the ultimate set is too big, too much money, too many pieces, I can show them the signature set. Okay. So your job as a salesperson is to provide the solution for your customers. Okay. And part of providing a solution is selling away from the previous option. Okay. So if the customer just said no to the homemaker and I'm dropping down to a galley set now, I'll actually sell away from the homemaker. I'll say, oh, totally, Mrs. Jones, I totally understand. Like that homemaker, that's a lot of money, right? And you don't see yourself using all those pieces. Like, I don't want to get you anything that you're not going to use. That's a decent size set. Let me show you something that's actually a lot better. It's a few less knives, a lot less money, and I think it would just be the perfect set for you. It's called our galley set, right? And then you show them the galley set. So sell away from what the previous package was. Okay, so hopefully this gave you some tips on the mindset of what it means to close and what it means to handle objections, right? And some verbiage as well. And you can practice this with your manager. You can practice this at Champs Club for how to actually handle those objections. Okay. And remember that you're a personal shopping assistant. And if you apply that objection cycle, it's going to take practice, but that's where the growth comes in. That's what makes the job exciting, and you'll do great.
Oh my gosh, give me hands. Woo! Seriously, I need some loudness. Yes.
Wow.
Cue dog.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. All right. Yeah, we should just tell people to unmute. Okay, I need a couple takeaways. I know there's been some stuff in the chat box, and either Quentin, you could just hang with your voice there. You could go to Shay's computer, or you can come up here if you want. What are your like, what's one nugget for sure